standing committees?
House Bill 16, sponsored by Agriculture. State land leasing improvements, an act relating to state lands. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 16, State Land Leasing Improvements. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Elliman, Allred, Banks, Conrad, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Slagle, Winter. Representative Eklund, Chairman. House Bill 17, sponsored by Agriculture. State lands grazing of non-owned livestock, an act relating to state lands. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 17, State lands grazing of non-owned livestock. Respectful report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Elliman, Allred, Banks, Conrad, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Slagle, Winter. Representative Eklund, Chairman.
That's it. So I don't see any jump up for re-referrals. Okay, thank you. So Vice Chair Larson earlier when he was at the mic kind of explained the Craig report and the commodities piece of it. And our good staff will be sending out an email. Don Richards will send out an email to the body kind of explaining all of that process of how they take a look at the commodities to determine the Craig report. The only other thing I have for this afternoon, and I'm going to kind of hold to it, is I want Chairman Nicholas, if he can be found, to kind of walk you all through the goldenrod in more detail. I think it's really important as we come up on this budget discussion that we'll have, that you kind of understand what the buckets of money are and what their purposes are. So we'll stand at ease until the sound of the gavel. Will the House come to order, please? So Chairman Nicholas has done a lot of homework during the lunch hour, also with his knowledge. I think Chairman Nicholas what's this, your fifth terms? How many terms have you been on appropriations?
On appropriations, 5.
Five terms on appropriations. So it takes a lot of knowledge. I will admit that probably all of our pockets of money and budgets are complicated, but I don't think you'd find many other state governments that are much different. And so, Chairman Nicholas, if you could walk us through.
Okay, I mean, everyone got their goldenrod in front of them? We'll kind of walk through it. Mine's a little bigger, and it's white, so I can read it. So, by the way, if you want a bigger copy, you just ask some staff members, and they'll print it out on 11 by 17. And you'll see that when appropriations presents the budget to you, we're all working from 11 by 17s, and sometimes those aren't big enough, but it helps to visualize. So I want to take you to the last page to start off with, page 7. Because these are where some of the important numbers are that we're going to be dealing with in the budget tomorrow. And as when you see changes that when bills pass, this is where all the information can be consolidated and reviewed. And what you also will see here is the impact of what Craig did to our budget when Craig came out today, basically, and the differences of what it was in October. So we built our budget based upon the October Craig, and those are the numbers we worked from, and these are the changes. And the big changes have to do with monies going to our reserve accounts. You all learned that the reserve accounts serve a specific purpose for the various permanent funds that we have. So that, and what it really, they're meant to cover spending policies that we, by statute, use. We have a spending policy for the mineral trust fund. We have a spending policy for the common school account. Typically, those are around 5%. We'll just use that as the average. Those have changed over time, and we've changed them several times since I've been in the legislature. But that's just a percentage of the income that we can spend on the operations of government. Those spending policies changed by $160 million with this new Craig, meaning, in essence, we lost that much dollars in our reserve accounts. They went down. So if we go by actual dollars, our reserve accounts have gone down. If you had the opportunity to sit in on on Monday, because there's a bill out there that basically expands the size of our reserve accounts from what they are now, basically 1.5 times our spending policy. The bill has that go add more money into our reserve accounts and raise that up to 5 times the spending policy. And the reason for that is, the spending policy, or our reserve accounts are supposed to, if we have like a downturn for a year or 2 years, our reserve accounts cover whatever we can't spend. That's that 5% that we've already allocated for operations of government. So those reserve accounts allow us to cover that. So we don't go into a deficit type spending, and we don't have to find money someplace else during that period of time that these funds don't make 5%. And so we're at 1.5%. That bill changes it to 5%. And the reasons we'll go into when you see that bill, but basically it's so we have over close to $1 billion in reserve accounts right now. And if we can invest those reserve accounts by adding roughly another $500 million to them, the return on those reserves can be like 6% or 7% instead of 1.5%. So really the whole purpose of the bill of enlarging the reserve accounts is to get a greater return on that money that's just sitting there basically in an income account right now, like a checking account. And the difference is over $100 million a year. So after 5 years, we're making money on the whole project. But anyway, that's what the reserve accounts are for. That's to cover common schools, the permanent mill trust fund, and then we have other smaller accounts. We've got Hathaway Scholarship, we've got higher ed accounts. All of them have these reserve accounts to help cover the cash flow based upon our political circumstances. So what this page does, it looks at the changes in the reserve accounts, and it shows the impact on it. So on page 7, if you look at line 16, so there's no change to our general fund because of the new CREG, meaning, and we'll go back to the first page, but no big change on there. If you go down to the budget reserve account, by the way, the general fund and the budget reserve account are simply checkbooks. That's what they are. In fact, we had a bill last year to combine them because there's almost no reason to have two of them. It's created over time. It used to be that the budget reserve account was like our rainy day account. And over time, it just turned in more to a checkbook, and we created the LSRA. And so the BRA now only functions as a checkbook. And so when you want to know how much total dollars we have in cash, or you use both the general fund and the BRA to come up with that number. The rainy day count, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but no change really. Actually, you can see there the investment income distribution. Look at line 31. So the income from the LSRA went down in the new CREG, basically $45 million, just simply because of the stock markets and the rate of return on those dollars. The LSRA is invested in short-term securities and cash, but so at best you get a 1 or 1.5% return. But you'll see on the other page that the balance of the LSRA right now is around $2.9 billion. And so if you have a drop in, a half a percent drop, 1/4% drop in your insurance, in what your invested funds are making, that's the impact. And so that's what that negative $45 million is. Then the school foundation account, that's what now we're getting in on the education side, and this is the account that we fund our schools with on the permanent fund side. So look at the investment income, fees and leases, line 45, and we're on page 7. And this is the impact of this fund is $67 million. And that's the loss of income in the CREG projection in October till now, to January. And that is due to the projected revenues have simply gone down. So that they modified that forecast. And so that 67 you'll see will show up as a reduction in our reserve accounts. It doesn't take money away from us, but it takes money, it impacts our reserve account because we have to cover the reserve accounts. And so we'll talk about that more several times, particularly when that bill, House Bill, I think it's 89 now, comes up. Then down below, school capital construction account. So this is an account created to help, do what it says for school capital construction. And you'll notice that it should be at 0. Yeah, we added $5 million in it. That's just revenue from one of the sources that we have out there that feeds the capital construction account. We do not have a lot of revenues, sources that feed capital construction. And so typically I would say every single year, we have to go to other sources to pay for school capital construction. On average, since I've been in the legislature, we've spent anywhere between $100 to $350 million a biennium, at least, for school capital construction. And I think we had, the consultants have told us that in order to just maintain the quality of schools over time, ongoing, so you don't have to replace schools forever, it's anywhere between 150 to 200 million in new projects every biennium to replace old schools. there's 498 some schools in the state of Wyoming, all at different ages. And so, but with major maintenance, the question is, when do you have to replace them? In the 2000s, we were going bankrupt basically, and then all of a sudden we had the boom that you've heard about that, and coal bed methane, all those things, and we were working with close to 1.5 to $2 billion surpluses for several years. During that time period, for about 8 years, because we had those surpluses, they created the Hathaway Scholarship, but which was a $500 billion plus program. But they also went in and rebuilt a lot of the schools around Wyoming. And so that they were catching up, though, because in the 90s and in the 80s, we simply didn't have enough money to rebuild old schools. And so there was so it went down, no expenditures, then back up in the 2000s. Then it went back down after 2008. Then we went back up to 200 million a biennium in around 12. We went back down in 19. And this year, you'll see very little appropriated, although we're going to throw some more money in that pot. You'll probably see it in a supplemental budget, because there's a long because of it. But basically, we're waiting on new studies, on new assessments of schools, before we get in line and start building new schools again. So we're kind of at a temporary standstill, but you'll see that in the next biennium, we'll start spending $200 or $300 million on schools again, just to start bringing them up to snuff, because they age out. Okay, then down at the very bottom, those are the reserve accounts we were talking about. That there's the permanent mental trust reserve account and the common schools reserve accounts. So we kind of already talked about that. Now let's just go back to page 1.
Chairman Nicholas?
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So just one thing for the body to think about on these reserve accounts. So we have this spending policy, and really it's, just call it what he said, 5%. But it's 5% on a 5-year average of the entire permanent accounts. So whether that's the permanent mineral trust fund or whatever. And so what that spending is, right? So that spending on the permanent mineral trust fund side, that income, that 5%, is then directed towards appropriations. So that goes into appropriations. On the school side, that goes into the school foundation program account. That helps fund schools. So the income off of these permanent accounts, they go to help the general fund side and the school side. And the reason you need reserve accounts is because if you don't make 5% income in any given year on those accounts, or for a 5-year period, you may have to draw out of these reserve accounts to use those to bankroll your spending policy. And it's very complicated, but I thought maybe that would help explain it a little better. So thank you.
Well, and just to follow up on that, go to page 1, go down to line 61. This is the permanent mineral trust fund spending policy reserve account. And you can see that on July 1, 2022, the balance of that account was $461 million. So that's the largest reserve account, but that reserve account is basically, it tips at 1.5 times our spending policy, the 5-year rolling average of the spending policy. And it's not tipping yet, and I forget the tip. I think the tip is around 560 million, if I'm not mistaken, before it tips back in to the LSRA or into the general fund. So when I told you there was roughly $1 billion, a little bit less in the reserve accounts, look at the balance of the capital line 67. That's the common schools reserve account. It's got 280 million in it, and then add 280 plus 461, and you're already getting close to an $850 million. Just sitting there, basically making anywhere between 1.5% to 1% interest. And so, and those grow, they kind of ebb and flow, but typically they grow until they tip, or or we expend them. We had to go into both of those funds in 2017, 2018, because we didn't, we couldn't meet that 5% obligation in our spending policies. So just look at line H. That's the Craig we were talking about that came out in October of 24. October of 22, that we based our budget on and run our numbers on. And so that's October Craig. And you'll see that basically what the general operations of government, if you go down to line 29, no, I'm sorry, line 20, I just go to line 15. Net revenues for the general fund, $2.8 billion. And then if you go across to the Gov's Rec, 3.7, you see that? So in the governor's budget, he expends all of the 2.8 billion plus additional dollars up to, so basically $900 million more in his proposed budget. Well, yeah, he's going into to savings to do it, yeah. And then the Gov's Rec, with the new budget, that number is modified, it goes down by about $1 billion, or $1 million. And that, you'll see the BRA, once again, that's just a checking account. And so really, there's not much to do with that. And then line 25 is the LSRA, the wonderful rainy day account. You know, there's only 2 or 3 states in the nation that have a fund like this, and we're just incredibly blessed to have it.
Chairman Nicholas, though,
ahead.
one thing I might point out, and correct me if I'm wrong, like on the budget reserve account, that 115 million, we keep a certain amount in there, and it's basically an emergency fund. And I should remember the name of it. I'm sure you do, or Representative Harshman, but
It's the
basically we keep that little chunk of money in there, and it's
Spending
a
policy.
percentage of the budget. And we keep it there for an emergency, and the governor can get to it if it is an
I
emergency.
think we call it the spending policy and amount, and we've had this discussion over the last 5 or 6 years on whether or not we even need it, given the fact that we have the LSRA. But it's just been the practice to keep a balance in that fund, and so we just continue to do it. So go down to line 25, that's LSRA, and look at the balance, $2.9 billion, which is the highest, I believe, it's ever been. And except for 1 or 2 things, it almost would have cracked 3 billion, which was, there's no policy on how large this account should be. We've debated it quite often, and the uses for the LSRA. And my guess is we'll have those debates again this year. I understand there's a Senate bill that wants to kind of cap the amounts of the LSRA and then have it tip into the permanent funds at some point in time. So you'll be revisiting that number. But then go look at the Gov's Rec line, that's J, on line 25. And you'll see that he expends roughly $900 million from the LSRA as part of his budget. And then you'll see that because of the reduction of the new Craig, then we dropped just below 2 billion because remember on page 7, we saw that this drops by 45 million. So with the same expenditures, it drops below 2 billion. What you don't see is that we have various ways that money tips back into it over time and where this money comes from. And so it will creep back up by the end of the biennium, but this is just a kind of a point in time number based upon the budget. So the other thing, the other part to remember about that is part of the money in that savings account, LSRA, came from ARPA dollars that were free dollars, which gave us extra money to save for future spending, because we supplanted our our general fund dollars and other dollars, but with about $470 million with those ARPA dollars. And so we could save them. And so we just put them over here and we put that in the savings. So when you see that $912 million surplus that is in the Craig report, remember that half of that is one-time dollars. That will be cut in half on the next biennium, assuming all things are equal 2 years from now. So our savings will be $450 million in excess of our revenues instead of 912. That's assuming that life is exactly the same and all the revenues are the same when they come in and they come out. So whenever you have one-time dollars, we try to be, meaning appropriations and the legislature, very careful about where we spend those dollars. Because what you don't want to do, if you can help it, is create ongoing obligations. And so you increase the budget to the point where all of a sudden you run short of, your one-time dollars are gone and you've got to find another money source, or you've got to cut back on what you just added. So we like to do it, for example, construction projects, things like that, which are one-time revenues, and you get a bang for your buck because then it lasts for another 30 to 160 years to go forward for the benefit of the future folks of the state. And so then you can see that what the remainders of the counts are and the difference between October Craig and the Govs Recs. But the rest of it just kind of falls into place, I think, but your spending policies and your reserve accounts and school capital construction. So we've never funded school capital construction since I've been here, or developed a mechanism to do it. So it's a hodgepodge. We take money from the SIPA account, we'll take it from the general fund, we'll take it from other sources to fund what we know are ongoing obligatory updates of schools. And we worked on that a little bit last year, and you'll see there's a bill right now in the Senate that tries to stabilize that account and add more dollars to it. We'll just see how that proceeds, and I think that came out of the Cap Fin committee. But it's just an issue because it's not funded. We always have to pull money from someplace else to fund it, and so it's a fight every year on how much we're going to spend on education because there's not a regular funding source for it. And so it's just one of the goals in the future that it would be nice to change. So let's go then to page 3. So this tells you, go down to line 24. So this is the LSRA. And then go to line 34. And you'll see and line J, you'll see 912 million. See that? And you'll remember from your freshman orientation or from what we've seen in the documentation that all the legislators received, that's the surplus. So that's the surplus that Don Richards said we're having this year. Just by the way, 2 years ago, that was a negative 900 million. I mean, that's how much the world has changed. It's almost incredible.
Chairman Nicholas, what page was that on? Because I'm confused.
I believe it's page 3, line 34.
All right, thank you.
And you'll also see then, if you go to L, column L, in the governor's rec, the governor spends that through his supplemental budget. He spends that 912 million. Or appropriates it. Part of that, about half of it, goes into the Permanent Mental Trust Fund in his proposal. Currently, the supplemental budget, which we will do a round robin in tomorrow, the appropriations is doing something different than the governor's rec. We do not put it in the permanent fund. We put it in the reserve accounts. There is a discrepancy of opinion between the House and the Senate. And so we'll be debating this with all bated breath coming on January 30th. January 30th, we present the budget to you, the supplemental. Then there's a day gap, and then there'll be amendments, and we'll walk through each one of the changes to the governor's recs, and we'll explain why we did what we did. We also basically expend it, but we do it differently. And that's, it's always an important thing to understand, I think, that if you look at the Constitution, it's the legislature that's responsible for appropriating the money and where that money goes. Anything that we receive from the governor is simply a recommendation. We don't have to follow it one iota if we choose not to. It's because it's our fundamental constitutional responsibility. Because he has the time and the agencies and the understanding of state government, it makes sense that he puts the budget together. But when things that we don't like, we change. And we give direction to agencies, and we give direction to what our priorities are as opposed to the governor. And so that's one of our primary functions of serving on this body.
So Chairman Nicholas?
Go ahead.
So line 34, that's the key line. So isn't it, so like during session, when bills with appropriations pass one house, don't they start to show up? We start to have it starts to show up in that line, and then you'll be able to see whether we're in the red or we're in the black as we go through session. And that's kind of the ticker tape for the budget.
That's correct, but what'll happen, there'll be another column. There'll be an expenditure column, so it'll be column O over here. And so at each time we pass legislation that expends dollars, they'll come from that, or they'll come out of the common school account, depending on where we spend it, and that number will start to go down. And that's that's just the basic accounting rules, but that's who you follow it as from day to day. Usually you'll get a goldenrod. It'll show up on your desk about every 2 or 3 days that has the action of that this body takes and that side takes, and just to see where we're at, so we know if we're spending more than what we have in our bank account, and where it goes, basically, because you can also then go through these pages and find out where the money went. Okay, any questions on this page? Art?
Go ahead and go to the mic, please. Representative Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So on line 34, page 3, I don't think maybe I didn't hear it, but we go from 912 million to 0, and then we were at 3.8 million, right? On the line or column N. Can you explain that 3.8 million in column N?
I can, and basically that's, I believe that's just interest earned that automatically flows into the LSRA. So it's money that has been received since that 912 was calculated. Okay. If you go down to line 63 and 64, you see that? That's an automatic appropriation from the general fund's spending policy. So what those are, that's our spending policy figures, so you just understand what they are. All right, I think that's all I really have to have on that particular page. So now let's flip over to page 4 and go to line 39. This is a school foundation program. So it's the same thing, except it's just the school checking or bank account and reserve accounts versus the general fund. And
So Chairman Nicholas,
go ahead.
just on this, so if you think about J is really was the situation before the budget was developed. So it was basically assuming that everything was the same as the year before. And then once the governor had his recommendations, within those recommendations, he had appropriations. And so if you think about on the school side, the governor in his recommendations had a full external cost adjustment. And so that put more expenditure into education for one, and then obviously school capital construction and other things would pull away from that account. But Jay is really, prior to any governor's recommendations, if we'd left everything exactly the same with just some minor tweaks that are assumed in the process. Chairman Nicholas.
And so that's the surplus, yeah, at the status quo before any appropriations, basically. Any questions about that? So, one of the interesting columns that, look at line 53.
Chairman
Go ahead.
Nicholas, just one more thing on the school thing, because I do follow the school money pretty closely. So you think, wow, it went from 950 to 597. How do you spend 300 million? So you have to remember that one of the governor's recommendations was to take 200 and some million of school foundation money and actually put it in the permanent school account. So the big inviolate account that just generates cash. So when you see these large drops, there's a very good chance it's going into some other savings pot.
Yeah, for example, if he decided he wanted all of this to go in the permanent fund, into the common school permanent account, then it would go to zero. And you will see when our budget comes out, that number will be less because we're taking roughly 500 million out of this fund and putting it into the reserve accounts. And so that number will drop based upon your joint appropriations recommendation. So, but that's, once again, that's how you follow the money. Then, yeah, if you look at line 53, this is just interesting because this is a transfer from the SLMRA, which is increased state royalties. And it's just interesting to see that those transfer of royalties, that's where that extra $5 million is floating around that you see both in line 39 and down in line 68. Those are just royalty income that
Chairman
is reflected.
Nicholas, just a quick thing on that piece there, the SLMRA, I don't even know what that is, but I do know that 83 million basically comes out of state land, comes out of our state lands. And so constitutionally, we hold 2/3 of the royalties off state lands in the permanent account, in the permanent school account, and we can appropriate 1/3 of all of the royalties off state lands. And as Representative Harshman used to say, if a big strip mine moves on and off of state land in a year or two, you can see dramatic changes in that number just based upon where they're mining and when they're mining.
Okay, any other questions on page 4? Page 5. Here we have the spending policy. These are the reserve accounts again. And so basically it's just a breakdown and reiteration of those final dollars that we looked on page 7. So it's a more of a detailed iteration of those particular funds. So the spending policy on the permanent trust fund, that's 21 and 22. And then if you go down to line 40, that's the spending policy appropriations for common schools. So you understand what those spending policies are. And same thing, look, that's a 5-year rolling average at 5%. Page 6 is the water accounts, and I'm not going to spend much time on that. But It's just an accounting of all the funds in Water 1, Water 2, and Water 3. Most of you are aware of what those are, either through your training or because you'll get a water bill, and we'll be appropriating from those accounts in that water bill. We have one every biennium and every time we have a supplemental as well. So with that, if you have any other questions, but that's really all I had to present today.
Chairman Nicholas, thank you. And on the water accounts, you'll notice today, I think today, or maybe it's tomorrow, I'll send the omnibus water bill to Ag. So if I didn't do it today, it'll be tomorrow. And so you'll see all those water accounts if you're in Ag then, and when that hits the floor, you'll see those water accounts as well. So I sure appreciate you doing that. I know it gets boring, right? But you need to start, new members and even old members, you need to start refreshing your mind on what these numbers are and what the goldenrod means to understand the really one, I think maybe the biggest, frankly, our greatest role in state government is we're the fiduciary of this state of Wyoming. We're the ones that pull the strings on the dollars. And so it's important that you continue to learn about the dollars and how the money flows and how the accounts flows. And so I guess, thank you. And with that, I think we got questions. Yes. Representative Rodriguez-Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question for Representative Nicholas. I'm sorry I didn't bring this earlier. Page 4, line 34, under the, looks like Governor's recommendation, AG Law Office. I was just wondering if you could explain that appropriation. Thank you.
Chairman Nicholas.
I don't have the budget in front of me, but I presume that we're in the process of litigation on school funding. And so I believe that's
correct.
dollars requested by the Attorney General's office to fund expert witnesses during the process of that litigation. When you see the supplemental budget, we increased that by about $450,000 because it was the conclusion, and we met with the executive on this, is that it would behoove us to get outside counsel. Right now, the Attorney General's office is staffing the litigation. For various reasons, we think it would be to our advantage to have outside counsel. So we're going to increase this number to about $750,000 and retain outside counsel. And I know that they're in the process now of going through the process of identifying who that outside counsel will be.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A question regarding page 5, under ARPA and line 60 and 61, it has the 2023 Supreme Court recommendation and the 2023 Governor's recommendation, and this again is under ARPA. Is the Supreme Court in conflict with the governor in their recommendation?
So Chairman Nicholas, if you have any information on what those
Sure,
two
sure.
lines are, or if you
So-
want to get back to.
No, that's pretty simple. The Supreme Court made an ARPA request that was, that we then approved last year for certain dollars for requests made by the Supreme Court. So that's all that is. Everyone can make a request on ARPA. And so by the way,
Thank you.
if you go to our fiscal office website, so that's I'm trying to think of, so we have a fiscal office that's run by, that works basically for the state, but it's also a semi-independent entity. So it's the Wyoming Fiscal, I don't even know the acronym, but
I don't know.
they have a website that has every single request and expenditure for ARPA dollars. And it's really, if you want to know anything about ARPA, how much has been asked for, what was denied, and where the money went for every penny, it's all listed there. And I'll get the name of that website and have it sent around to everybody, because it's a nice tool to see exactly what we did with the money. As part of the ARPA proceedings, the federal government required a fairly sophisticated accounting process to make sure that we can verify that all the dollars we received were spent consistent with the directives of Congress. And so they built this website, and it goes through a review process, and they actually hired an outside accounting firm to help put this together for them and to make sure that all the dollars, because if we spend it outside the guidelines, then the state itself is responsible to pay those dollars back to the federal government. So they went out of their way to make sure that every dime that they allocated, billions of dollars, that is accounted for to the penny, and you can see where it went and what it was expended for.
And thank you, Chairman Nicholas and Representative Ward. Because the judiciary is a separate branch of government, they can bring their own budget, just like the governor brings his own budget. And so that's kind of why you see that bifurcation. They bring their own budgets. So thank you for all that. I don't think we have any more committee announcements, and does that clear the deck? So that clears the deck. So Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I actually do have a committee announcement.
Well, I'll let him make the motion, and then I'll let you do committee
Oh,
announcements.
you know what?
It's for a lot of us, yeah. Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adjourn until 10 a.m. tomorrow, January 13th, 2023.
Committee announcements. Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 9 will meet tomorrow morning, starting at 7:30 to take up 2 bills, House Bill 42, off-road vehicle operation, House Bill 62, open banking, and the first half hour will be an update on the state of oil and gas production in Wyoming.
Chairman Olson.
Thank you. Your House Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions Committee will meet tomorrow upon noon recess to hear 2 bills, HB 5, voter registry list, voter ID, absentee ballots. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is the wrong announcement. Let me get this where this is my first session.
Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 3, revenue, will meet in 10 minutes. I'm assuming we're going to have this gavelled out. So in 10 minutes at 3 p.m. in room number 3 to continue hearing House Bill 65, 988 Suicide Prevention Hotline. Thank you.
Chairman Olson, second time at bat.
All right, let's see if I can get this right. Your Corporations Committee will meet tomorrow in room 5 upon recess to hear HB 49 and HB 55.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, will meet tomorrow at 8 a.m. in House 03 to continue hearing House Bill 4, Medicaid 12-month postpartum coverage, and if time, we'll hear House Bill 18, Missing Person Alert Systems, and House Bill 19, State Indian Child Welfare Act.
Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Joint Appropriation Committee will meet at 8 a.m. to continue markup or the round robin for the general the supplemental budget with general government appropriations. And your House appropriations will meet at noon for re-referrals to hear House Bill 50 and House Bill 61.
All right, I'll get to you just a second. So 2 interesting things there, I think, for new people. One is Chairman Burkhart is putting on an educational thing tomorrow. I think if you're interested in that, that's good stuff to learn, right? And then if you're around, the round robin in joint appropriations is always very entertaining. Seriously. And if you want to check that out, I think it would be worthwhile. And so Mr. Majority Floor Leader might have a have a committee of the whole list for us?
I do, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, this will be your committee of the whole list for tomorrow. If you want to take these down, you can start reading these bills overnight and familiarize yourself with them. First bill on the committee of the whole will be House Bill number 17, State Lands Grazing of Non-Owned Livestock. Give you a second. The second bill will be HB 29, Community College Funding Distance Education Credit Hours. Third bill, tentatively, House Bill 16, State Land Leasing Improvements. And the fourth bill will be House Bill 5, Voter Registry List, Voter ID, and Absentee Ballots. And then if any other changes or corrections, I will certainly let you know, but otherwise, that's the committee of the whole as it stands. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You have heard the majority floor leader's motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. The House will stand adjourned until 10 a.m. January the 13th.